everyone, it's Cass. Welcome back to my channel, What Cass Read. Today I'm finally here. We are going to wrap up the BOOKTube SFF Awards. I have all of my categories that I was a judge for. I have all the books here. If you haven't already, I have the live show linked down below so you can see the full results. Also, sorry about the birds if you hear them in the background. They are going ham outside my window right now. The 5 categories that I judged this year were Best Middle Grade, Best YA, Best Debut Category, Best Sci-Fi, and Best Adult Fantasy. But yeah, I had so much fun. Also, I don't expect her to make an appearance, but I have recently adopted a new puppy. Her name is Luna. She's a black lab mix. She's not feeling the best. That's why I've got a little towel on that couch over there, and I've got a towel over here, but she is quite the couch potato. I don't envision her getting off the couch to make an appearance in this video, but if she does, that's where she is. Maybe when she's feeling a little bit better, then I will introduce her in a video for you all, but she's super adorable, and she's snoozing right now. I love her so much. Okay, for the Best Middle Grade category, our nominees were Arusha in the End of Time, written by Roshni Chokshi. We had City of Ghosts, written by Victoria Schwab. And of course, we had Wondersmith, written by Jessica Townsend. So the first book that I want to talk about, this is Arusha in the End of Time, written by Roshni Chokshi. I actually rated this book 2 out of 5 stars, as well as this was a book that I ended up DNFing. We as judges, we discussed earlier that it was still okay to vote in a category that you DNF'd a book in, because I do feel like a DNF warrants discussion and why I just didn't feel bothered to finish this book. So this book follows Arusha, who is a young girl who lives above a museum with her mother. Her mother is the curator and she gets to run around and just do fun things. The only thing is that Arusha is a little bit of a liar, and she has had some friends catch her in some lies, and they just want her to prove that she has all the things that she says she does. So they come to see her at the museum. Arusha has a magical lamp, rubs the lamp, creatures come to life. She goes on a mission to save the world. I really did like the premise of this book, but what made me DNF it was this book ended up trying a little bit too hard. And what I mean by that is I think Roshni maybe fell into the trap of she's spread out so much amongst YA, middle grade. She just recently released The Gilded Wolves. I haven't read much of her body of work, but I think this book suffered a little bit from the fact that this didn't feel totally middle grade to me. This felt like a middle grade adventure with young adult characters. The characters seemed to be older than they were supposed to be, so that kind of got annoying for me. The humor, they were really all about the punchline, and maybe that's like a Rick Riordan thing. I kind of was listening into the other judges discussing this book, and they said, you know, Rick Riordan really likes that punchline. I didn't have the patience to go through this because it was boring. The series has its merit because it's definitely a side of middle grade that we don't get to see, some Indian folklore woven in, but it wasn't enough to hold my attention. City of Ghosts, written by Victoria Schwab. Victoria Schwab goes by her full name when she writes for middle grade and young adult, and then V.E. Schwab in her adult stuff. This, I think, was my favorite of all of her work that I've read so far. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. I didn't pick this in the middle grade category because Wondersmith, duh. This book wasn't that bad. I really felt like we had a great spooky adventure. I love Edinburgh. I love her best friend Ghost. Like our main character Cassidy Blake can see ghosts, and she has a best friend Ghost who comes with her on her family adventure to Scotland because her parents are ghost hunters, and it was really cool. I think why I liked it so much is because some of the things that I get bogged down with in some of the other V.E. Schwab books that I've read is that she has like really great ideas but doesn't always execute. This, I think it was just short enough that we could get into the adventure, get into the setting, have these really 2 great young characters. I wasn't expecting like crazy amounts of world building. It was just a cool spooky ghost story. So yeah, I did rate this 4 out of 5 stars, and this is actually something that I think I would continue. Like, I totally think I'll buy the second book in this series because Cassidy Blake and her family are going on another ghost adventure in another country. I don't remember which one, but it's already been, you know, on Goodreads. The release date is coming up, the cover's already there. So I think I'm definitely going to pick that one up because I did have a good time with this one. But then of course my winner for the category was Wondersmith, written by Jessica Townsend. I've rated this 5 out of 5 stars. I don't think at this point I need to talk about it in great detail because I've just spoken about it at such great length. And to me in this category, there was nothing else that was ever going to compare to it. When I was picked as a judge and this book was nominated for the middle grade, I knew already that there was nothing that the other two books, whatever they ended up being, would do to top this for me. It's a young girl's story, but it's written for everybody because there's themes of this young girl feeling a little bit more ostracized from the community and having something about her that is a secret that she has to keep. But does she really have to keep a secret? And just, again, exploring more of Nevermore and the Wondrous Society. I'm a big fan. Hollowpox has been announced. I'm already pre-ordering that. So this book and this series is going to continue being in the top for me in my life. The birds are actually quiet outside my window. It's so exciting. The next category is the YA category. The nominees included Skyward, written by Brandon Sanderson, The Cruel Prince, written by Holly Black, and then we also have Muse of Nightmares, written by Laini Taylor. Okay, so the YA category, for me, I wasn't expecting much. Like, we had a really close race for the YA books, and so we had a lot of really great contenders to narrow it down to this top 3 for the YA books. So I'm really satisfied in the books that we ended up reading, because believe it or not, I ended up rating these books all 5 out of 5 stars. They were all 5 out of 5 stars for me. So the first book being The Cruel Prince. This follows a young girl named Jude Duarte. Her family is killed by the Fae, and then she ends up having to flee the human world, and she goes and lives in the world of fairy with her stepfather, who is the fairy who ended up murdering her mom. He's a fairy general. So very unique sort of situation. Jude Duarte has a twin sister, so they're both completely human, living in this fairy world, but they do have a half-sister who is part fairy. The relationship among all the sisters was great, and Jude and her sisters needing to be careful and watch what they end up doing, because the fairy world was not created for them and there's so many dangerous things about it. And I really liked that. We got so much of that aspect of fairy stories, fae stories that I really gravitate toward. I just really like how evil they can be. There were so many points where I thought I knew what was going to happen, and then it completely didn't happen the way I thought it would. I can't even tell you how many times Holly Black did that. So that's why I rated it 5 out of 5 stars, because she just kept me guessing. Great cliffhanger. I've totally read The Wicked King already. I am such complete trash for this book. Yeah, I've already talked about this book as well. Then we had Skyward, written by Brandon Sanderson. 5 out of 5 stars as well. I really enjoyed this book. I just liked how quick we were to get into the action. Sanderson does such a great job of just creating new worlds, new characters. I loved the flight school aspect of it. I loved, I mean, maybe sure, it's a cliche story of a young girl trying to prove herself in this world, but you know, if it's not broke, why fix it? This follows our young protagonist, Spencer. She is growing up in this world that they're on this foreign planet, and the human race is being attacked by this alien race called the Krell, and they have to take to the skies to be able to defend themselves. Every now and again there's different Krell attacks, and they're just trying to survive. The human race has actually taken to the deeper levels of the planet. They all live underground because they don't want the Krell to know that they're there. And just the different societal aspects of living underground and how they've adapted to this situation. So Spencer's father used to be a pilot in the fleet when he ended up deserting when Spencer was a young girl, and that's a shame that has followed her and her family her entire life, and she's definitely trying to prove herself in flight school to become a pilot, make a name for herself, and sort of protect the family legacy. Loved it. Loved all the teenage flight school characters. This was so much fun. I just honestly had so much fun with this book, so this was a 5 out of 5 star book for me as well. And then the final book, of course, is Muse of Nightmares, written by Laini Taylor. This is book number 2 of the Strange the Dreamer duology. So I don't actually have a physical copy of this book, but I did listen to it on audiobook. Highly recommend the audiobook narration. The audiobook narrator, I think I was talking with somebody in the comment section, the audiobook narrator, super dreamy voice. Hello. So it kind of like fit the vibe. It really fit the vibe for this book. There was just no comparison, even though these were all 5-star reads for the young adult category. As far as a book, I said this in the live show, as far as a book that really stuck with me long after I read it, it was Muse of Nightmares. It had to go to the top. The ending was really, I don't know, it's profound, like too douchey of a word, but it was really profound. Just how we wrapped everything up, all the different storylines that we encountered in the first one, how we wrapped everything up, and how it really did like bind all of these different races and legends and human stories together. There was no comparing it to the other two books. It was a work that was completely on another level. So Muse of Nightmares, top book of the year for sure. Strange the Dreamer was a top book. I read that in January. This is the first time I've read any of those books, and they were great. Hi! Oh, puppy girl. Oh, do you see her? This is Luna. Hi. I know she doesn't feel good. She got pneumonia from the kennel because we adopted her from a shelter. So she doesn't feel so great. Oh, that's mine, not yours. Hello, Luna. You see her? Oh, she's so precious. Hi, puppy girl. Go do whatever you want, puppy girl. This is your house. Okay. Hi. Thank you. Okay, so the next category is the best debut category, and the nominees for that category are The Poppy War, written by R.F. Kuang. We also had Children of Blood and Bone, written by Tomi Adeyemi. And then Trail of Lightning, written by Rebecca Roanhorse. Okay, out of all the categories that I had read this year for the awards, this one definitely underwhelmed me the most, which is kind of sad because last year Booktube SFF Awards debut category was my favorite. I discovered a lot of great authors, Nicholas Ames, S.A. Chakraborty. Those are two authors that I've continued reading on with their series. So yeah, I was highly underwhelmed with this one. You've seen me go back and forth about this book quite a bit. This is Children of Blood and Bone. The magic in this world has changed, and it's been taken and it's vanished from the different people. A young girl named Zaylee, her mother used to be a very powerful magic user, and then, you know, the ruling class, the ruling kingdom came in and started doing away with all of the magi and all of the magic users in the land. So Zaylee and her younger brother go on an adventure because they have to buy and sell fish, and then she encounters a young princess in disguise who is on the run. It started off like fun. I did enjoy it. I just wished I loved it just for like the West African mythology that we were getting for it, but it was one of those situations where here's a really impossible task that none of us can complete, and then literally 2 pages later it'd be like, oh, here's a solution to that impossible task from 2 pages ago. I gave it quite a bit before I ended up DNFing it. I rated it 2 out of 5 stars. One too many times where it was like, oh, peril, mortal danger, and then 2 pages later, solution, we're fine. Over and over and over again, and I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I don't even think I got to the love story that everybody else was complaining about this book. This isn't for me, so I DNF'd this one. This book, Trail of Lightning, I definitely have a different opinion than most people on this book. So I did rate this 2 out of 5 stars. I did finish it. I listened to both Children of Blood and Bone and this book on audio, and I don't think I would have finished this if I didn't listen to this on audio. Alright, so as far as the world building, I think this is where people get really attached to the story. This is a post-apocalyptic urban fantasy. Young woman has to save the day. It's really cool because, like, the United States, there was a cataclysmic event, like a seismic event that happened to the country, to the land, and there was a great flood, and so the Navajo Nation has walled themselves off from the rest of the world, and then they were able to rise to power. So that was cool. That was cool. But it just didn't have much else going for it for me, because our young character Maggie, our main protagonist, she's a character that I've met many times before in urban fantasy, where she's just this rough and tumble girl. She grew up rough, she loves guns, she wears leather jackets, she has a mysterious dark past, she's got a mysterious dark ex-boyfriend who she ends up following for most of the time, but is he her ex-boyfriend? We're not really sure. And we just spent way too much time trailing after all of these male characters in her life. And it wasn't until like halfway through the book where I realized, like, oh wow, she has no agency for herself. Like, she literally doesn't do anything for herself. She's just doing everything to follow all the men in her life. Not male bashing in this book, but like, I just realized that she herself was not a developed character with her own sense of purpose and her own sense of agency. And I was like, oh God, I'm over this. So I did rate this 2 out of 5 stars as well. Pretty bummed about that. All right, and then this is The Poppy War, written by R.F. Kuang. I have rated this 4 out of 5 stars. I do already have a full spoiler-free review of this book already on my channel. Tabbed the heck out of this book. This book hit me at the right time. I had been searching for something. I'd been searching for Asian-inspired fantasy that wasn't gonna let me down. I feel like there had been several authors that had been letting me down in the past, and Rebecca Kuang saved me from that darkness. So this follows Rin, who is a war orphan. She has been raised as like the stepchild of this family. Every child in the country ends up taking this Keiju test, which will dictate what their careers will be, which kind of schools that they can get into. She ends up working her ass off and acing this test, so she ends up getting to go to one of the most prestigious academies in the whole country. When you start this book, it's got all of those like really familiar beats. Just a young girl like being a badass and learning new things about herself, doing some martial arts, we know I'm a fan of. She gets punched in the face, she comes back up, she aces the test, she loses the test, she loses friends, she does all this stuff. And then halfway through the book, it really takes a different turn. It felt like 2 different books that I was reading this, when I was reading this, where that first part is this young girl coming up into her own in this academy setting, and then we have an invasion that happens. And this book was based off of some historical events that have happened to the Chinese people, some that were not that long ago. It was pretty dark, pretty brutal, pretty grim, like pretty much every kind of content warning that you can imagine. You should think about that when you start off with this book. So this book I felt like was pretty polarizing in that aspect, but it was enough for me to be interested in Rebecca Kuang's second book, The Dragon Republic, which comes out later this year. It spent a little too much time at the end setting up the next book, which is where I felt like that disconnect. It was kind of 2 different books when I read it, but this one was my winner for the category, 4 out of 5 stars. 2 more categories left. We are now on to the best science fiction picks. So the nominees for this category were Vengeful, written by V.E. Schwab, The Calculating Stars, written by Mary Robinette Kowal, and Record of a Spaceborne Few, written by Becky Chambers. This whole category for me ended up surprising me because science fiction is not typically my wheelhouse. I am trying to get into some more science fiction because I did say that that was a goal of mine for this year. So I was really surprised by this category overall because there were 2 knockout, standout, really great stories, and then one that was just kind of meh. The meh one was Vengeful, written by V.E. Schwab. This book I ended up DNFing. I said in my Goodreads review that this felt like the superhero sequel that I didn't ask for, but that the studio was just like riding the hype on the first success of the first installment, and then they made a sequel just to keep the ball rolling. Like, that's how I really felt about it. It didn't do anything for me for Victor and Eli the way that Vicious did. I really did like Vicious, and this book just felt really flat in comparison. I will also address that there have been some comments and some people who are really upset at the way that the judges were treating this book, but I think initially it just goes back to overall we were pretty surprised that this had made it as a top sci-fi pick. This is pretty contested of whether or not it could be considered sci-fi, so I did like say in the live show that I was like, if you were upset by the fact that this book even made it in, then nominate like crazy. Be able to get the books that you actually wanted to see represented of the category in there. And I would also say that for the past 5 years, I think Victoria Schwab has been nominated multiple times, and she never wins, but it's just like a popular vote that ends up getting her in there. So that's just a little inside peek. Of the 2 Victoria Schwab books, right, we had City of Ghosts, which I really liked, and then this one. It's just, for me as an author, I just go back and forth on her. Sometimes like I really want her stories to succeed because they sound so cool in theory, but the execution never totally nails it. And that's how I felt about Vengeful, so I DNF'd this book. But then I picked up The Calculating Stars, And this book was life-changing. This is an alternate history United States. It starts off in the 1950s, and we go through like the space race, like blossoming technologies in the United States at the time, and the space race and the international relations we had, and sexism in the workplace, and racism in the workplace, and just in our culture as well. But it's also the United States is trying to build itself back up from a meteorite crashing to the earth just outside of Washington, D.C., completely wiping out the eastern seaboard. Our main character, Elma York, and her husband, she's a mathematician, her husband is a physicist, and they, through math, through physics, through the power of science and sciencing the hell out of all of their problems, they discover that the Earth is in an extinction event and that the human race must take to the skies and try and colonize the moon, because the Earth is eventually going to not be habitable for humans any longer. So it was super good, super good. I've pretty much told everybody about this book. I listened to this on audio, and it was great. It was fun. It was so much fun. It made me feel like I should have tried harder in calculus in high school. Only took calculus 1, and then I just didn't finish the rest of them because I was like, I'm not going to need calculus in college. But it totally changed my mind that maybe I would have gone on a different path if I had had this book as a high school girl. Loved it so much. So this was a 5 out of 5 star read. But then Record of a Spaceborne Few, also 5 out of 5 stars. Becky Chambers has just spoken to me on a deep spiritual level this year. I said in one of my recent videos that I feel like she's my Robin Hobb of sci-fi. She really takes those slice of life stories, but in space with different alien races, and I read all 3 books of this series, the Wayfarer series, for this award season, and really connected to all of them. I said in the live show that this really had me in my feelings for a long time, and that's because it takes a close look at death and communities, and how communities come together to mourn, or do they come together to mourn? How do communities react to life and the sacredness of life? Or it just was so good. So many different things. So this was my winner for the category, even though this was also a 5-star read along with the calculating stars. Okay, final category is the best fantasy category in adult fantasy. Our nominees for this category include Foundryside, written by Robert Jackson Bennett, Circe, written by Madeline Miller, and Grey Sister, written by Mark Lawrence. I was expecting this to be my top category. It ended up being YA, which was my top category for like across the board, and I expected to enjoy this category overall more than I did. So the first book that I want to talk about, this is Circe, written by Madeline Miller. This is the first time I've read anything by Madeline Miller, so I don't know if it was like some build up for myself that I was just like putting a lot of expectations on this author, but I did end up rating this 3 out of 5 stars. I listened to this on audio, and if I had not listened to this on audio, this was another book that I'm just not sure I would have finished. It really did move really slow for a good chunk of time. At times it just felt like we weren't going anywhere, we weren't doing anything. It was a mythology name drop, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. This is a retelling, but I just kind of got into that zone where it was a retelling, and I was like, man, I've heard these before. It wasn't bringing anything new for me, despite how beautiful it was written. I will say that this has inspired me to pick up A Song of Achilles, to try out another of Madeline Miller's books, just because I did enjoy her writing style so much. It was just the retelling aspect of this just, it didn't work for me. All right, and then this is Foundryside. This is a story about a young girl named Sancha, and she is a thief living in this industrial fantasy world where there are powerful merchant houses that control all of the money, control all of the trade. Pretty much if you're not a member of one of these merchant houses, or if you're not working for or living as a part of these merchant guilds, then you are a nobody, you're nothing, you're poverty to the max. All of the merchant houses have access to this magical technology called scribing, and the general population who is not a part of any of these merchant houses is really not supposed to access this technology. But the way that technology and magic sift through the world, there's definite black market trades, there's black market people who do the scribing for you, and Sancha has found herself doing quite well for herself as a thief and as someone who can provide goods for services and things like that in this world where it's just a really unfair sort of situation. And then of course things get stolen, someone stole the wrong thing, political powers have been working behind the scenes and things don't always go according to plan, and Sancha has to team up with some people to save the world. So I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars, had a lot of fun with it. I did also read this one on audio as well. Actually, a lot of these books I read on audio. I had a good time with it, but it wasn't my winner because it didn't leave a very lasting impression for me. As much as I did enjoy this, it wasn't enough to like really bring me into the next book. Like, I probably won't continue on with this series, but I didn't regret reading this one at all because it was just something new, something cool. I also said that I can see why fans of Brandon Sanderson would also enjoy this because of how fast-paced this was and just some cool magic that we don't really see a lot of in many different stories. So yeah, good pick, 4 out of 5 stars, just not my winner for this category. Here it is, Grey Sister by Mark Lawrence. This was definitely a 5 out of 5 star read. This was one of the last books that I read for 2018. I brought this with me for my family Christmas vacation and just loved the heck out of it. I tag teamed this both in physical form and on audiobook. I really love the audiobook narrator. So this is the second installment of the Book of the Ancestor trilogy, where we follow Nona Grey and her journey as a young novice in the Convent of Sweet Mercy, where they train young women to be magical assassin nuns. This world got so much more expanded in the second book. It took Red Sister and completely leveled it up as far as the skills that the novices were learning, the kind of magic that they were using, and as a reader, our insight into the true political machinations of what's really going on. Abbess Glass, if you're an Abbess Glass fan, she steps up in this book in a big way. This also had just a really amazing cliffhanger. I felt it was a really great ending for this chapter of the trilogy, as far as like Nona's journey up to this point. Loved it so much, 5 out of 5 stars. Huge fan of this whole trilogy. Whew, we made it. We are finally here. This BookTube SFF award season was such a big one for me. It was the first time I was asked to be a judge, so I was just honored in that regard. But I had so much fun because they were just, last year when I participated in the award season, I was just picking and choosing different categories that I knew I would be interested in, and maybe I would read all the books and maybe I wouldn't, and I had that flexibility. But this time it really forced me to have to read these books because I was judging them, and it opened my eyes to a lot of different things that I wouldn't have normally picked out for myself, like the Wayfarer series, the Calculating Stars. That was a totally new book for me. Giving Victoria Schwab a second chance with City of Ghosts versus Vengeful. Those were two completely different books, and I enjoyed one way more than I enjoyed the other. So I think overall this was just a really successful award season for me. Loved it so much. If you haven't already seen the results of the live show, again, I'm going to link that down below, so that way you can see the winners of the popular vote, the judges' picks, because not all judges agreed across the board. Not all judges had the same rating for these books as I did, but loved it so much. So we're getting together as judges, another phone call, just talking about how we can improve the award season for next year. So if you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to relay them to the other judges when we have our phone call. There we go. Twitter, Instagram, at whatcassread, same as this channel, super easy to find. My Goodreads link is always going to be listed down below, and you know how these videos end. I'll talk to you later. Bye.